So then let's look at other capabilities from Integration Suite. Nowadays, it's also quite, so you have many of the customers and the clients have PIPO running as an on-premise system. So on an on-prem system, you have your PI, which is running there as a middleware application or a tool which connects several other or which does all the integration, manages all your integration requirements within your on-prem environment. And now with the cloud strategy, we have seen that many of these applications are now moving to the cloud, and even there is a need that the middleware platform is also being moved to Integration Suite. Yeah, and this is a general now. This strategy is quite. This is what in general most of the clients have the requirement. So SAP came up with two possibilities or two capabilities within Integration Suite, which you can utilize to basically migrate your interfaces which are running in your PI system to the Integration Suite. Yeah. So that is what these two tools are used for. One is a migration tool, and the second one is the migration assessment tool. So they are two different, but they are both used in general to basically assist you in doing this transformation or migrating from PI landscape to Integration Suite. In PI, you say that you have hundreds of interfaces which are running. One way is to go with a greenfield migration, right? Greenfield, which means you are basically manually you develop everything right from scratch in the CPI, depending on the interface specification and the interface which is running here, and you try to replicate from your side on your own by implementing this, by doing this greenfield migration. Yeah, which means developing everything again in CPI. Then there are few other techniques. Something is called as a blue field migration or a brownfield migration or so on, where you take something which is already usable from this system, and on top of that, you utilize some of the parts from there and then optimize the rest of the process. Maybe depending on the capability of this platform, then this platform. So you have to then, in a way, change something or adjust something. The third is a complete like-to-like migration, right? Where you have a flow running and you want as is this to be migrated there, and it runs. Depending on these three strategies, you can then, how do you know, first of all, whether the interface, let's say there are three interfaces running here, interface 1, interface 2, and interface 3. How do you know that these three interfaces can be migrated as it is to our cloud integration flows? These are ICO objects in PIPO, right? So in order to assist you with this, there is this capability which is made available from SAP in the Integration Suite, which is called as Migration Assessment Tool. What this Migration Assessment Tool does is we have to connect this tool, which is running as well as in the Integration Suite, to our PIPO system. Once that is connected, then this migration tool will synchronize all the objects and everything which is available in the PIPO, all these ICO objects, which includes ESR objects and the IB and so on. Within this migration assessment tool, you can run this synchronization or this assessment button there, and then it will create a report out of that tool. Yeah, then run assessment. So first step would be basically connect your PI system. Second would be run the assessment, and third step would be analyzing report. Yeah, these are the the three steps mainly with this, which you have to do, which migration assessment tool helps you out with. After running the assessment, the report which is generated based on this report, it will categorize these three interfaces accordingly. Let's say it categorized the first interface, interface one. It will then show you, put it in a category where all the components and everything from these interfaces are like to like migrated to integration suite, which means it's 100% possible. Yeah, 100% possible, and with the migration. It then there is also one more category where it will put, okay, we can migrate, we can create a template iFlow for interface 2, but some of the components or some of the logic which is part of the iFlow cannot be taken over or migrated to integration suite. So you can say it's something like, for example, 60/40 or something like that. Yeah, in a way where you manually then have to do something there. Maybe there's a Groovy script return, or not sure, or JavaScript, or you are doing a service call out, but then that service call out is not migrated as it is, because in PIPO you write a service call out as part of your JavaScript or things like that. But in CPI you then have a request reply and those things which you can make that call out and so on. So maybe that step you have to implement it manually from your side. Then there is furthermore capability categories where the migration is not at all possible. Yeah, it says not even possible, which means the iFlow is quite complex itself in PI and several steps has been done. Maybe there are many to one receivers or one to many or so on, and there are many routing conditions, and there are also some externalized parameters which are set and so on. So depending on the complexity, it says then it's not even possible to migrate it. And based on this report, you can then decide your effort estimation, that how many efforts this project going to take if you have to migrate your middleware platform from PI to CPI. Maybe in here, out of 100 interface, there are around 50 which are possible to migrate it as it is. So maybe in the phase one, you say we have a least minimum efforts of maybe 5 man days or 10 man days to get this entire project completed, but at least 50% of our efforts will be migration will be done with this tool without any need of any implementation or so on. Then for this remaining two, you can say, okay, it requires some 40% of efforts there. Maybe for one interface, we take 3 man days. So the rest of the interfaces, which are around 30, for example, which will take around how many? 90 man days, for example, total. So you can get your effort estimation accordingly for this then. Yeah. So 90 man days overall. And this, it says the remaining are 10 iFlows. And this I have to create everything from the scratch. I take 5 man days to create one iFlow. So then I take 50 man days to make it happen. So then somehow you then get your basically total effort estimation in terms of this project. You can submit it to your management, to the client or to the customer or to the leadership team and say, okay, overall we take around how much? Maybe this 50 iFlows, there is still a need that you have to manually go and deploy these interfaces, because migration is one thing, but then deploying it and maybe some user credentials or authorization credentials, you have to create it in a security material and so on. So these are some configuration stuff still needed here. So maybe you take 2 days or 1 day for each iFlow. So and maybe some basic unit testing. So you say 50 man days for this could be. So overall, now you have your effort estimation if you have to migrate 100 iFlows from PI to integration suite. That's what migration assessment tool will assist you in doing. But this tool will not assist you in migrating anything. Yeah, this is just used for an assessment purpose. Then the second part which comes here is using the migration tool to actually migrate an iFlow. So now when you identify that I want to that this particular the interface one type of iFlows are 100% manageable to migrate it, then you can use in this migration tool, and in this migration tool you can actually select which iFlow it is and do next. You have to select a template and so on, which we will see it now as a walkthrough. And at one step, when you click OK, then this iFlow will be automatically be created in your integration suite and will be ready to be used, basically. Yeah. So that's what how you can use overall the this migration capability in order to migrate your PIPO based interfaces to CPI.
Varun, one question here, yes, because currently I'm also doing the migration, yeah,
Mhm.
of and I have most of my scenarios are B2B, yes. So EDIFACTs and VDA is very popular in Europe.
Correct.
So in this case, I use Make tool, yeah. So
Correct.
I am also new in the Make tool. So do you have any tips for me where I can do trading partner management or some things?
Actually, this migration tool will only assist you to migrate ICO objects, which are mainly interfaces. I mean, you cannot migrate these MIGs and MAG artifacts, basically,
Yeah, right, yeah.
from the PI system. So, or your EDI artifacts from the PI system. You have to then import, export it, or manually create them,
Uh,
basically.
the problem is that in the PO, the EDIFACT structures are different, and when I look on the
Correct.
Make tool, the EDIFACT structures are different, yeah.
Yes.
So what I am doing now, I am doing like a pre-mapping before here. So first import from the CPI into the PO here, adjust those things, and then use it into my iFlow. But at the moment, I am doing many manual works.
Yeah, you cannot automate that. So unfortunately, the TPM or the trading partner management designed or the integration advisor designed in CPI is completely different than what you have in PI. You cannot even have 20 or 30%, even it's not even in sync. So
Okay.
it's totally a different concept. Yeah, so unfortunately, we cannot use that for migrating your B2B scenarios there. But we can at least use to migrate our ICO objects with respect to point-to-point interfaces and so on using that. So let's see now to continue further, we will see this assessment application first. So how can you enable this? Let me show you here. So let me refresh this. Go to home, and in your home, you have to scroll down to the capabilities section, and this is where it is. Assess migration scenarios. Estimate the migration effort for process occurrence scenario with migration assessment. So that is what the first step is. So you have to click on next, and then this get activated. And once it is activated, you can then there are some roles which are needed to be assigned, basically, which are these migration assessment administrator, and integration analyst. So these are some roles you have to add it to your user in a way, which are these two. And once that you're done, then actually you can move and see how. So once you done this, so you click on this create request in here, and this will directly take you to the migration assessment tool here. Yeah. And this is how the tool looks like, basically. The first thing what you have to do is you have to connect, as I said before, you have to connect your PI system, because the assessment happens on the PI system. So that's where in the settings you will add the details of your on-premise PI system with integration repository, ES repository, and so on. It definitely goes over on-prem with Cloud Connector and so on. We have seen that now how Cloud Connector can be used. And once the PI system is then connected to your migration assessment, so this is first thing is enabling. The migration assessment, maybe I will put this as well here in the chat just for your reference. So enable migration assessment. So that is what is first is. Then the second one is how can you use migration assessment then? So first step is adding process orchestration system with we have seen that how can we do that, but you can as well follow this block and directory content, ESR content, and so on. So the procedure will be adding this and then selecting this. The user must be assigned to the following roles in the process orchestra. So the user which you'll use to connect PO must have this roles as well in the PI system assigned to it and so on. But then this connects your PI system. And then the next step it starts is the data extraction. Yeah. So here you see in the configure button, one second, in the request, you see we have data extraction. So when you click on that, that's where we start to create our extraction. So we can create extraction name with today's date, for example, extraction for today, maybe 0311, for example, 24. And here you will see the list of the PI system which is displayed, and then you can then start your extraction basically. So you see complete extraction. You want to extract all integration scenarios from the selected system, or custom extraction. You want to extract a subset of integration scenarios. Use this option, for example, if you want to exclude some integration scenarios, because in PI, maybe you know that this namespace, because in PI you have namespaces and so on, that this particular namespace is quite complex. I already know that this might not help, or I do not want to migrate this. Maybe there are some namespaces which are there, which are deprecated, which means you are not using those anymore and you do not need to migrate it. So you can then exclude this, or by doing some custom extraction, that you can choose what you want and what not. And once this is created, basically, if the extraction has the status completed with warnings or completed, open the extraction log and review the warnings and errors. Fix errors in your local PO system. Otherwise, they are not included in any scenario evaluation of the data extraction. Once you have fixed the errors, you must create a new data extraction. So usually an extraction will show some errors or so on. Based on that, you can then decide what you have to change in the PI system or so on. Otherwise, your extraction is completed. And then the next step would be scenario evaluation request. So this is where, depending on your extraction which has happened, you can then start your analysis. This is this step here, right? When I was discussing. So connect the PI system. There is a step in between which has missed, which is called as data extraction. After connecting, you extract the data, and with the extracted data, you run the assessment over that extracted data. So so that's where we can in the on this side, once the extraction is completed, you go back, and then we do the scenario evaluation. In the scenario evaluation, we can then select the request which we have created. Let's say I created a name called as extract data extract for 311, then it will show it in my drop down here. I will choose that use this extraction, and over this extraction request, do the analysis, run the evaluation. I can give the evaluation name and description and so on. Then the evaluation will be carried out, basically. And then there is this button here, trigger analysis and so on. Yeah, and you can, so schedule a new evaluation run based on current data. After you run it, then you can download that as an Excel file or a PDF file on that evaluation. Yeah. Depending on that evaluation, yeah, you see here, there are three categories the assessment puts into the IFlows. One is ready to migrate, adjustment required, and the third one is evaluation required. Yeah. Ready to migrate is these scenarios matched to the scenarios offered in CPI. They can be moved to SAP integration manually or semi-automatically. Additional configuration might be required. These configurations are usually creating authorization credentials and so on would be basic. Adjustment required means partially matched to the scenarios in CPI, but they can be moved to integration suite manually or further adjustment to end-to-end process based on best practices are required. Maybe here you have to do some error handling, or maybe you have to do some additional furthermore implementation to complete the whole scenario. And the last is evaluation, which means it's not even possible to migrate it. So you have to further evaluate and then decide what you have to do. Yeah, most of the time this ends up into a greenfield migration, which means creating that interface again in CPI. So then, depending on this category, you can then basically decide what to do. After that, you start migrating this basically. So then we have to use the migration tool in doing so. But before we move to migration tool, anyone has any question on the assessment?
So, Varun, while extracting the data, once the extraction got completed, is
Mhm.
that will be a document, or what is the content of it?
No, extraction will not create any document. That extraction, which means it just pulled out all the artifacts and all the information with respect to your integration, integration directory and ESRs. It has pulled everything, but it is still not assessed anything. So for assessment, you still have to run the evaluation report, run the evaluation request on the respective extraction. Yeah.
Mhm.
And once this evaluation is triggered, so once you trigger this analysis, and when this analysis is step is finished, only then the report is available, basically. And
Okay.
that report actually gives, with respect to the IFlows, like in PI, you have an integration IB, right? In the IB, you have a name of the iFlow. Yeah, you can maybe with the service interface or with the namespace and so on. And in front of that, it will show the status of it with the category, whether it is possible to migrate that and falling it in that category, or whether it is in another category or so on. So
Okay.
that is
So
the report about.
if I did the extraction, can I transfer this as a to my peer, saying that extraction got completed? You can do rest of the things like that.
I mean, I did not understand that. So you have run an extraction, right? So in the
Yeah.
extraction, you can request the extraction here, but then you also need to run the evaluation here then,
Okay.
right?
Everything stored on
Because
the tool itself. It's not
it's
downloadable on a.
no, it's on the same tool here, both.
Okay. Got it.
So it's in the request section. So here you can extract the artifacts and the extractions from the PI system and run the evaluation over that extraction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And this will then generate a report depending on the trigger you did on the evaluation, and that report is then can be shared externally, basically, in order to then, and that report consists of a list of all the artifacts and everything. In front of that, there will be status and so on, putting it into these three categories. This one. Okay, so now let's let's say you identified some service interface from the PI system and from the evaluation report, which falls under this category, ready to migrate. Then how will you actually do the migration from PI system to the integration suite. This is where you can use migration tool capability, basically, which is also part of the SAP Integration Suite itself. Anything which you move are created as integration flows, as artifacts, basically. And there is also a new things which are which is patterns. We can see what patterns are there. So patterns, right? There can be patterns like point-to-point pattern, sender A, sender B, and so on. And there are some other patterns which are used. We can see this here, what patterns and so on in here. So these are some migration patterns. But let's see the tool first, how it is available. So basically, this step is a prerequisite which you have to do. That means you have to connect your process orchestration system to integration suite. It is different than connecting migration assessment tool to integration suite, because here also you are connecting the PI system, right? That does not mean that when you have connected the PI system here, it is also available for the migration tool as well. That's not the case. So you have to connect separately your PI system to migration assessment and then separately to the migration tool as well. So let's see that where it happens. So if I refresh this one second. So if you have to go in the settings tab, and because migration tool is part of the integration suite itself, which is embedded within integration suite. This assessment, you see, it goes to another Fiori application, which is this migration assessment, right? It's not within this integration suite as such, because it runs standalone there. But here in this, you go to the integration, and in this integration, you can then go to the system, and that's where you see it's the similar kind of a UI, but it is different. So the UI here, it's also the same. It's all the same, but it behaves differently in a way. So here also you have to do the same step of connecting your PI system to the integration suite. Once you have done that, then you have finished the first step, basically connecting your process orchestration tool to the integration suite. Yeah, supported components and so on. So you see, these are all the components which are supported, which means migration of the ICOs. That means these in PI, if you have these artifacts can be migrated via this migration tool. So like communication channels which are supported are all these, mainly all of the common ones. Service interface, RFC, IDOC, interface objects like service interface, message types, data type, context objects, mapping, message Java mapping, accessibility, function libraries, imported archive, and other configurations like XML to JSON, JSON to XML, and routing, and so on. So these are these are some artifacts and objects which, if you are using within your IFlow in PI system, then they can be migrated to the CPI accordingly. Now let's see patterns. So before going to this pattern, I would like to show you how you can actually migrate it. So now in this, when you have connected a PI system, you then have to go to your integration API section. You have to yourself create a package. Maybe the naming convention and all you have, because migration tool will not create a package also for you. It will only create an iFlow, right? So maybe then you have to prepare everything like a package or so on. You have to name it accordingly. You can decide what naming conventions you have to give and so on. So let's say once you are in the package, and then when you click on the in the artifact section here, when you click on the edit button, there is this migrate button which comes here. You see, this says migrate artifacts from process orchestration system. And this is what the migration tool is about. So when you click on this, that's where you have to proceed forward. So you have to first select your PO. And for this, you do not need to uh, basically add any entitlements or new capabilities or so on. This is available as a standard in the integration suite, this migration tool capability. So this you can use like uh, like it is. So you have, once you connect this, then basically the next are the steps. We will see the steps now. We start here. So once we have created a package there, in the artifact, we go in edit, we go to the migrate button, and that's where we start the migration. So in here, we first select the PI system, which is then we have added, we connect to that PI system. Once the connection is established, we then move forward. Now in here, we will see all the artifacts or like all the ICO objects which are there in my PI system. Now, depending on that, which IC object I want to migrate, I have to select that, search that, and I have to select that. So this is what you do in the step 2, which is process orchestration artifact. Now, the third step is a bit specific. Now, yeah, once you select this, you further have more details here with respect to you can filter some additional information with the standard communication component and so on to identify your correct artifact. But once you identified from the PI system which is the artifact which you want to migrate, the second step which comes is selecting a template. Now in migration tool, this step you have to do it mandatorily. Now, there are templates which are provided in the migration tool, which are standard. You see supported patterns and templates. So, and that's where you have to select a template. Now, these patterns are all created as a template in the migration tool, like for calling it as point to point asynchronous, point to point synchronous. You see, point to point asynchronous means the request just goes and goes out. Point to point asynchronous synchronous means there is a request reply used basically. So recipient list, which is asynchronous, content based routing, and so on. Depending on that, basically you have to select which template you want to use. Yeah. So now it's like point to point async template, which means it will create an IFlow, something like this, point to point async, which means it will get the trigger get the information and will push it to the target system. It will not provide any response back or anything to it. So that's what you can then select the template which you want to migrate to, because you very well know how your interface behaves in PI. So you are best to select this template then from your side. Once that is done, basically then in the integration flow here you can give some names, what name you have to give to your IFlow with some descriptions and so on. Yeah, you can then review, everything looks fine. And the last step is migrate. After migration, basically an integration flow will automatically be created in that package, which is then migrated directly from your PI system. And it will migrate, you see, open the anticipated integration which is created. In this example, a point-to-point integration flow is created having SOAP adapter, 2 mappings, and 1 XSLT mapping. And you have not done anything manually here. So all these artifacts were imported directly from the PI system. Even the channels were added by the migration tool, and some you definitely need to go back and check some configurations here, but you do not need to do anything here. Maybe you have to just have a look once again that everything is okay or not. But here, maybe you have to set some configurations, maybe authorization credentials and so on, and have to deploy this. But still, you save a lot of efforts in recreating everything from scratch. Yeah, certain configurations are needed. As I said, maybe in the receiver adapter, you have to configure whether if it's an on-prem, then which location ID to use, what is the address to be used, and so on. Yeah. You can also verify the resources at the mapping steps like XSLT and so on. And once everything is verified and you have checked all the security artifacts like credential name, alias, and everything, the last step would be to deploy this. And after deploying it, basically you have successfully then migrated this using the migration tool.